Hey everyone, this is Daniel, and in today's video, I'm going to walk you through how I built my Power Apps travel app using the geospatial controls. And this all started when I started taking the light rail uptown. A light rail is a smaller version of a train transportation, and I had to use the light rail's mobile app. And as I saw the app, my wheels started turning. I said to myself, like, I am pretty sure I can rebuild that app in Power Apps. And that's the whole scenario of this video, is I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison of that production app which somebody else has built and this Power Apps app which I have built. And I'll show you what was my thought process, like what were the key features that I took, what were the controls in Power Apps that I used to make this app, and I'll show you the finished product. So stick around, this will be fun. But first, here's my intro video. So let's get started. And let's just jump into demoing the two apps. So the first app that I'm going to demo is the app that the city provides to me. It's called the Light Rail, and that's the one that I refer to as I use the Light Rail. So now when I go ahead and click on it, you see that's the app in between. I go and click on it. This is the immediate app which shows up. As you can see, it's one screen. It first went ahead and gave me an overview of all the destinations which are there on the Light Rail, and then it immediately showed me the one which is on one end, which is on the top, or called as the northbound. And over here, when I looked at it, I was like, you know what, this I could pretty much rebuild in Power Apps. At least my wheels started turning because I had 20 minutes to kill on that light rail. And I kind of was breaking it down to 3 different sections, and we'll talk about that more in a few minutes. But overall, as you can see, there's the header side. On the top, it says Charlotte Light Rail, driving, walking, those 2 tabs on the top. Then I saw this middle one, which is basically a map. So that got me thinking, oh, hey, you have a map component in Power Apps. I could leverage that. And on the bottom, I had this other sections, which is basically just like a gallery is what I was thinking. And in the gallery, I could go ahead and say, all right, these are the different sections that are coming in. And I can go ahead and provide what's your current location, what's your next location, what is the northbound, which is the train that's coming your way, what is the train that's leaving your way. All of this data could be presented in a gallery. And as I was looking at it, I saw, hey, there's the arrow on the left, which is on the bottom left, and it goes ahead and does the navigation, which is so similar to the video I just showed you last week of how you can go ahead and build that navigation menu using the gallery. So as I was thinking, I said, you know what, I can rebuild this. So now let me show you the finished product that I did in Power Apps. So here we are in the Power Apps mobile app for my iPhone. And on the top, you see there's something called as Light Rail app. I've actually made it as a favorite app, so I don't have to keep searching for it. It just shows up right on the top. So now I'm going to go and click on it, and the app actually opens. And then right off the bat, you will see that this is how I actually designed it. By the way, the app is fully responsive, and we'll talk more about that. But as you can see, I was able to replicate at least the overall design of the other app over here in the one that I made in Power Apps. So again, on the top, there is this header type of field. In between, there is the map. That's what it is. Then I also went in and added a little bit more design, but I was able to add, some of these icons that you see over here, these 3 icons. And this bottom section is a gallery. But let's not just stop over here, because if you noticed in the previous app, as you went ahead and did the toggling, the map actually moved. And I was able to accomplish that in Power Apps. So I'm going to start on the left side over here. That's the one. If I go and click on it, it's actually taking me to my next destination. And as I do, you see the map actually is moving now. It's moving down. And when I go ahead and do it a little bit more, it's moving some more. And I'll go ahead and do it again, and it moves. You see, it's got that same effect which we had on that production app over there, the one that the city actually provides. So now I'm going to actually walk you through how I was able to build this in Power Apps. I'll break it down into a few different things, at the configuration which was done at the environment level and all of that. So let's go take a look at that. So the general availability of the geospatial features in Power Apps was January 20 of 2021. So it's been over a year, which means it's been tried, it's been tested, and it actually really works well. But the key thing I want you to know before we even jump into the studio and start talking about that is the setting that you need to turn on at the environment level. So here I am in my Power Apps Studio. I've logged in as a Power Platform admin because that's required for you to go into the Power Platform Admin Center or PPAC. And that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top right. I'm going to click on the settings gear. I'm going to go to the admin center, and then you select which environment you want to turn on this feature for, because like it sounds, it is turned on at the environment level. So I went ahead and actually selected my environment, and the environment I call that as this learning dock. So I go and select that. And once I select it, I have to go into the settings And inside the settings, I'll go ahead and click on products. I go and click on features. And inside the features, as you can see, there's a bunch of things that are about to load. But right over here, there is the geospatial services. And this is by default toggled off. You need to go ahead and toggle that on. So that's a very important thing that you need to do first. So make sure that you might have access to your environment, but you may not be a Power Platform admin. If you don't see this flexibility, reach out to your Power Platform admins and they'll be able to turn on this feature for you. But plan ahead that, hey, this is going to turn on at the environment level. All right. Very important thing. All right. So now let's jump into the front part. Is right over here is my Power App Studio. And here is the app that I just demoed to you. This is it, fully inside the Power App Studio. And as you see to the left, you immediately see, hey, Daniel's got a MS container. He's used the container control, which means you got it. The whole thing is fully responsive. So as you've seen some of my videos, I've done a full deep dive, and I'll put the link down over there, how to build responsive apps. The first thing I do is I go ahead and add the container. And once you've added the container, if you come to the top, the right side over here, you'll see that these ones have got formulas. The width actually has a formula, the height has a formula, which means there's no static numbers. It is responsive. So as I click on it, you will see the width is got the parent width and the height is got the parent height. So it's fully responsive based on the device that you're using. So if you went ahead and actually open it up on your phone, your smartphone, it'll go ahead and respond to the width and the height of that device. If you open it in the tablet, it'll go ahead and respond to that. It will also respond to your desktop. So it's built fully responsive over there. So that was the first important thing, is to go ahead and add that big outside container and make that responsive. The next thing I did was I broke the section down into 3 different containers like I just talked about. So let's take a look at them, all right? The first one is the header container. Now the header container is inside that parent container. And as you can always go to the top right, you can see that anything which is on the top, the first one, the X and the Y always stays 0 because it's the initial one on the top. But as you can see, its width and its height, it's got some formulas in it because it doesn't, when you go and hover your mouse on that, you see that there's this function or the FX sign, which means it's running based on formulas, not a static value. So the width is easy. Like whatever is the MS container, go ahead and give me that width, all right? But then its height, well, that's where I had to actually play around with a little bit of formulas, because I wanted to gauge that, okay, I only want 1/7 of the entire app. That's how much of the entire real estate of the height. I want to only take that much. And for me, the 1/7 worked just fine. You could go and tweak this based on what you're using is, but for me, 1/7 was fine. So that's basically the overall idea of the shell of the top, which was the header container. Again, it was on the top, so its X was 0, 0. Its width was the same value as the MS container, but its height, well, I went and took that as 1/7 of the parent one. Now, the map container starts right below the header container. Therefore, its X is 0 because it always starts on the extreme left, but its Y has a number to it. You see that the map container actually starts after the header container, and therefore you have this formula, which is go ahead and get me the Y value of the header container plus add to it the height of the header container, and then right below it is where the map or the middle container starts. This is basically how I go ahead and plan it. And then the width, again, you already guessed it, it's taking it from the parent width. Now over here, I could have also used the MS containers.width. I could have done that as well, all right? It works both ways. And then its height, well, I had to again do some calculation. I went ahead and set it in this way, is that I want to go ahead and do a 0.7 value of the parent height. And I intentionally did this because in the first one for the header, I just did a div. I divided it by 7. But over here, I went ahead and did a multiplication. So I just wanted to show you a few varieties of how you can do that. And then the footer container, you guessed it, is now right below this middle one, or the map container. Therefore, its X is 0. And X is usually always the easy one. It's the Y. You see, the Y now goes ahead and it takes the Y value of the map container, this middle one. To it, I add the height because I want to get the entire height, and then right below it is where I go ahead and start the footer container. So you see now the 3 containers itself, which are inside the main container, are automatically responsive based on each other. The header container is always on the top. Its X values will be X and Y 0, 0. But then you have the map container where its X is again 0, but the Y is based on the header. And then the footer container, as you guessed it, is also based on the map container. So it kind of just, it stacks on top of each other. As long as you've got the one right above it correct, then one below it doesn't have to care about all the other ones. It just matters about the one right below. And that's how I went ahead and created these 3 basic containers. So now let's go ahead and jump into the header container. So as I expand the header container, you see that I've got a few other controls in it. So let's go and take a look at that. Now, keep in mind, and this you're going to see this in all the other containers as well, is that the header container itself is responsive, which means all the other controls in it are only going to reference the header container and its X and its Y and its width and its height. I don't have to reference it across the parent app. I just reference it across the header container. That's the key thing. These all controls will only reference its height, its width based on the original header container. Why? Because the header container has already been set to responsiveness. So let's start from the top left, right? There is the icon menu over here, which basically in your app, if you've got any questions or any FAQs, well, you click on that icon. Now, its icon base is pretty simple. See, its X is basically going ahead and setting the value of the width. Now, I could have gone and put the X as 0, but in this case, I wanted to go and say that, hey, I want the X, but I also want it just a little bit outside, because otherwise, if I put X, what happens is it goes ahead and sticks directly to the left. I wanted to give it just a little bit more, and that was the value. So I went and used the self. The self is actually a very important property that you're referencing yourself, hence the term self. But I wanted to take whatever was the value of it, an eighth of it, and just move it a little bit outside. And that's why you're able to see that it's not sticking. You see, it's not sticking. There's actually a gap over here. That little gap over here, I was able to see that gap, that little gap, I was able to get it with this value. And it's just those little things, which adds that right pop-up or that wow factor. This is one of them. All right. So, well, I went ahead and gave it the X, its width. This is how I calculated it because I wanted to make it responsive. So I actually took the overall header container, its width. I wanted to actually make it based on the height because the header container's height was much more easier for me to work with. So this is the height. So I just took a fourth of that height, and that was the width of basically the question icon. I know sometimes it gets a little confusing, but if you just think through it, is that Daniel just used this one's height, the container's height, a fourth of it, and that was what gave it the width of this question mark over here. And as you can see, the remaining part is all pretty simple and straightforward. This guy's height went ahead and made it a third of the container's height. So always referencing the main container, the header container over here. On the other side, it was pretty much simple and straightforward. The only thing was its Y could not be 0. I had to go ahead and use this header container's width. But if I went and used the header container's width, it goes and sticks completely outside over here. So hence I had to subtract it with the width of itself. And I also did a multiplication of 1.2 so that it would stick not just all the way to the right, but it kind of moves a little bit outside. See how I was able to move this a little bit outside? This thing over here, I moved it a little bit on the inside. If I go and zoom it in, you will see right here, this gap, that gap came in because of this multiply by 1.2. Okay? Again, those little important things that I wanted to call out over here. Overall, that was basically the top thing. The buttons pieces, simple and straightforward. What I did was on the buttons, I went ahead and made sure that it was, again, referencing the header container. Same thing on the other one, the walking time, it was all the walking button. It was also referencing the header container. Now the walking button wasn't referencing the header container as far as the X goes. It was referencing this driving button because remember, that's what is right next to it. Let's just reference that for its X control. So over here for the walking, I went and put in get me the X value of that plus its width, and I got its location. The Y piece, well, I had to go ahead and reference this label over here, and I went ahead and made sure that I got the Y value of that. Plus, I wanted to move it down a little bit, so I went and did a plus 20. Now, I did a plus 20 because I was pretty fine with it. You could go ahead and reference maybe the height of that header container and then divide that by a certain value to get what you want. So you play around with this responsiveness over here. Now the map container has fewer controls, all right, but it's the one which I will focus a little bit more extra time on. As you can see that in this map control, I only have 3 controls, but the big one over here, which is the focus of this app, is the MS map, which is the map control. If I go ahead and actually click on this media, and if I scroll all the way to the bottom, you see that it's got this map. By the way, you see this little diamond icon. That diamond icon tells you that if you're going to leverage this control, you need to have a Premier license, the one I just mentioned before. But that's the control that I used, all right? When I went and got the control in. Now, it's important to note that the control of the map, that when I went ahead and tried to make it responsive, its X and Y was 0. Well, why did you make the Y 0? Because it's somewhere in between. But remember, I've gone ahead and referencing this inside this container. And that's the beauty of these containers, because the moment you put a control inside it, these controls can also become responsive as long as you reference those controls, which is what I did. Right here in the width, I went ahead and the width of the map, I referenced it to the parent container over here, which is the map container. Again, its height Well, I went and again referenced it to the map container. Here, I didn't have to do a multiply by a point some value or a divided by a value. No, I just filled it to the entire real estate value of that map container. So that was the easy piece over here. What I did have to do was actually focus on making this map work. So what is the data source that I use for this? Well, the data source was a SharePoint list. Right here is my SharePoint list, and this is the place where I went ahead and added my 5 destinations. I made sure I got their addresses. I went and got the icon too, and this is actually a beauty of how that map control works, is if you just give it a specific icon name, it will actually go and grab it. And I put the link to all the icons and their names below over here. You can go ahead and get that information. Now, in addition to the addresses, you also need the latitudes and the longitudes, because these are the ones that you'll be using to actually go ahead and get certain properties over there. So you need basically all of this information. So that's basically the SharePoint list that I've used. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. So Daniel, you're already using a per user license or for that premier control. You could have gone and used Dataverse for that, and you're absolutely right. I could have done the Dataverse over there. But again, my data source was already a SharePoint list, so I went and used that. In your case, your data source could already be a SQL table, and go ahead and use it because, hey, you're already using a per user license for that. So kind of play around with that idea as well. So let's go back to my Power Apps, and now I want to focus a little bit more time on this app, all right? So we made it responsive, that's great. But now it's location items, which are all of these items. You see them? They are coming from that light rail. That is the SharePoint list, which means that you're right. I did have to go ahead and make a connection to my SharePoint list. And as I click on these fields over here, it's going and pulling in all of these fields. That's how it is working, all right? That's basically the fields that I have, which are columns in SharePoint list. It's going and pulling all of that on. Now, I went and selected very specific things when I wanted over here. I did want the cluster pins. Well, I could have removed the cluster pins, but I just kept that on. Zoom control, I went and left basically all of these 4 things that I wanted. I went and left that on because that gives the really additional functionality. Remember the out-of-the-box one, which the city provided for me, their app, didn't have this capability for me to zoom into the map. In fact, their app just shows me the map. I am taking it to the next level using Power Apps to give the end user that, hey, you see that map, but maybe you wanted to zoom in a little bit to see what are the other things in it. Are there any stores or any other places around it? I'm giving you that flexibility thanks to giving you all of these controls. Therefore, I went and turned everything on. The zoom control, the pitch control, I left all of them on for you. Now, this was basically the overview of the map piece over here. Now, the final piece that I want to talk about this map control is the ability to get the current location. What that means is that if you notice when I was showing the demo, anytime I would toggle to the right or toggle to the left, this thing would always show me what is the current address that we're looking at, the current location. And that is happening based on this current location latitude and current location longitude. So that's why I had to, my Excel spreadsheet had to actually have both. I had to have the address because all of these pins are getting dropped because of the address. But this default location that I'm getting, that I'm getting using the geolocation, which is the latitude and the longitude. So as I just click on it, you will see that anytime I have selected an item, whatever is the selected item, go ahead and take its latitude, go ahead and take its longitude, and always present that as the default one. The current location will be the default one. And that was the icing on the cake, is where I was able to go ahead and make it so close to the actual production app is by this functionality. Is that when I was toggling right or toggling left, this thing was referencing all the current address that I'm showing. That was, like I said, it's the icing on the cake over here, all right? So now let's focus our attention on the footer container. So to see the footer container, I'm gonna go back to my tree view over here. I'll go and collapse the map control, which is the middle one, and let's expand on the footer container. Now the footer container, the main one I wanna focus over here is the MS Gallery. And this MS Gallery and how it works is so similar to the one that I just did before, last week actually. I put that link below. Go take a look at it because I've explained that in detail, but I'll just give you a quick 30-second view of how that works. In this functionality, I'm basically filtering the gallery at its time using the ID column, and then I go and get the ID values. Now the ID values are always updated. It's stored in a variable. It's called as the var item. It's stored in the variable, and I'm constantly filtering because I can see this item of the gallery always shows the filter item, but this variable over here is going ahead and getting updated based on if you click to the right or if you click to the left. If you click to the right, then you will see that I'm always going ahead and adding an item, all right? And if it has reached the total amount, which is the total number of items in the SharePoint list, it will toggle back all the way to the initial one. Again, I've explained this in detail in the previous video. Go watch it and I can make a better understanding over there. And the left place is again the exact same thing. The only difference is a -1, all right? So that's the big thing on this section over here, which is the gallery. Now, to make it responsive, I had to again follow the same type of protocols. Is what I did was I went ahead and first made the gallery responsive. Now, the responsiveness of the gallery, actually, I was able to make it a little bit looser. Why? Because it was already under the footer container, and it worked really well. Because you can see in the gallery piece, all I did was made sure I had the width matched. I left everything as is, but because it fell under the container, it actually worked really well. However, inside the gallery, I had to focus on that. The overall gallery was fine. It's the items inside, the controls inside the gallery that I had to focus on. So on the top one, I had to just make sure that its values were correct, its width was correct. The X and the Y was 0, well, because that was just fine. It was all on the top. The one on the bottom, well, I had to make it a little bit more responsiveness. I had to make sure that its width matched with the title. I had to make sure its height. Its X was 0, but its Y, well, the Y had to match the title on the top. I had to reference the title. And so on and so forth. When I went there and got all these other controls in, I had to always match the one on the top. And this is the very similar process that I was doing, is going ahead and working all of these controls. Key thing is get the top one right. Once you get the top one right, all the other ones are dependent on that. And then there was some designy features. Like you can see, I was able to go ahead and get some designs very similar to going ahead and referencing, some colors that I wanted, just add some variations over there. And since we're in the last piece over here, I just want to quickly cover that I did go ahead and take this little section. It is outside the footer. It is actually part of the middle container, which is the map container. As you can see, I went ahead and added this icons, all of this positioning inside the map container because it just works really well, right? All these icons and everything. Finally, let's go and take a look at the app on start. In the app on starts property, I've gone ahead and set some values of the variables. These are critical for this navigation piece to work. And again, I've explained this step by step in that previous video I just talked about. But all I need is I'm referencing these variables to go ahead and make sure that I'm toggling correctly to the right, toggling correctly to the left, and moment I'm on the last item, it'll go and automatically loop back over there. All right, I'll explain in that other video. So hopefully this video gives you a good understanding of the power of Power Apps, because let's think about it. We just took an app from out there and rebuilt the whole thing from scratch using Power Apps Canvas app, making it fully responsive for a mobile device. And now you've got the flexibility to go ahead and add all bells and whistles and make it exactly how you want it, which could be something that the employees in your company use. So hopefully this was helpful. And as always, keep using Power Apps. Hey everyone, hopefully you found this video useful. And if you did, can you help me help you? Can you subscribe to this YouTube channel? Because remember, I provide fresh content on a weekly basis and it's 100% free. So if you have subscribed, thank you so much and pass the word. But if you haven't, subscribe, click on the bell notification and let the learning begin.